The part about whether ministers have the time to watch movie is very much left to the individuals. I like to watch football. When the World Cup comes, I won't say I will have no time.
After spending decades running some of the biggest media companies, he decided to retire. Today, splitting his time between quiet Edinburgh and busy Singapore, he shares his perspective on what truly makes a great film, that engaging content must always come before the language or dialect we use. Let's step into the world of Chang Long Jong and explore dialect and journey.
Hi, welcome to Edinburgh.
Yeah, it's nice to meet you here in Edinburgh.
It's really fantastic to be able to do something here together.
You have retired, and
Yeah.
so far, how's life?
I'm really enjoying my life thoroughly at this time. A lot of things just happen at the right time for me. I had my grandson last year when I retired in September. He was just born not too long ago, and I'm enjoying my grandfatherhood, so to speak. But more importantly, I think I continue to be able to find that purpose in life, to be able to live a very engaged and fulfilling life. Because if you lose the purpose, then suddenly you're lost. You say, I don't know what to do anymore. Retirement for a lot of us, actually, it means that you lose a certain identity first, right? Because when you are working full time, you have a job. You can be a CEO, you can be a doctor, you can be a lawyer, and that identity gives you that sense of purpose, and then it gives you that drive to say, oh, how am I going to sort of have that energy to live my life, to achieve my goals. No different from companies. When we were working, we think, hey, what is the mission of this company, and what is the vision of this company? It's the same thing, because mission is really giving you that purpose, right? Then when you join a company, you say, oh, I know my company's mission. Same thing. What is my life's mission, right? As a person, similarly, I need that. So the problem comes if you retire, you say, oh, I'm no longer a CEO, I'm no longer a doctor or a lawyer or whatever profession, right? Then if you're not careful, then you start to feel that there's a struggle, you don't know what to do anymore, because there is no more sense of identity. But that shouldn't be the case, because you look at it at every stage of our life. You can be a father, you can be a grandfather, you can be, a teacher to someone, you can be a volunteer. So I think that identity is important. To me, that identity must be able to transcend all the life stages in our life, or it shouldn't be restricted by the fact that you only have that identity because you are holding a job. Then that's dangerous, because the moment you don't have a job, you lose the identity. So for a lot of people, they find different ways to discover their identities, and at different stages, that identity may evolve. But to me, a very important thing is that at every life stage, you should have one identity that you never change. And I found that identity personally, that's to me, as a Christian, I have an identity. Whether I'm young, I'm old, I'm middle-aged, it doesn't change, right? And that also gave me a certain sense of purpose. So I like the fact that, I'm enjoying life in Edinburgh, but I don't live in Edinburgh forever.
Okay.
So I will still spend most of my time in Singapore. So when I'm in Singapore with that purpose that I know I have, then I sort of can reconstruct the kind of framework for me, what I want to do, right? I enjoy volunteering my service in charity. I sit on the board of Tai Ho Kwan, which I enjoy very much too, because I find that I'm able to contribute to something very meaningful, a good cause. I'm also very active in teaching, in sharing in my church, which I think is another form of teaching. I like mentoring and helping people to sort of find meaning in life, right? I think that's important. So I think that is what I do very frequently. I also like, on the more leisurely side, right? I enjoy some games. I started to pick up pickleball. I also, in a way, I like gardening for a long time, so I am able to do a lot more of that now. walking in the park with my wife. So I think those are the more sort of my own leisure, right? Ironically, I don't watch a lot of movies. The last movie that I watched in the cinema must be a few months ago. There was a movie called Project Hail Mary. That was like couple of months ago. So I don't normally watch a lot of movies. I watch my sports. I love football. Not so much of playing, but watching. So World Cup is now like keeping me quite engaged as well.
Talking about World Cup, what is your prediction?
We are now at the semi-final stage,
Yeah.
and looking at the four teams, they are all very strong. But my pick of the eventual winner will be because of the fact that I feel they have the strongest squad and their forward line is very formidable.
Interesting. Let's see whether your prediction is accurate. Yeah.
Sure.
By the time this video is online, we should know the result.
Yeah, I'm very confident
Okay.
that my
Yeah.
my prediction should be correct.
Yeah, coming back to movie, just now you said that you hardly watch any movie, but there's this China movie, Dear You, 给阿嬷的情书. It's a massive hit from your MM2 and Mediacorp experience. What do you think this Teochew film can cut through so successfully?
I have not watched the movie yet, although I intend to watch it. From what I've read about the movie, I think like most movies, right, that do well in the box office, the biggest success factor is the storytelling. And storytelling, by that, what I mean is the ability to sort of engage, right, the audience, and emotionally, and the connection with the audience through the portrayals of that affection, human emotions, kinship, hardship. All these things are actually what will connect well. And the other factor, I think, in this instance, right, is the fact that this movie tells a story in a certain era that many people can relate to, right? You're talking about I think in the 50s, when in the context of Singapore, for example, our forefathers who came to, we call it Nanyang, and through their hardships, and those days, unlike now, for them to reconnect with their families back home was really, really difficult. And I think that story has got that very interesting backdrop about how those people, right, in the old days, how they actually, the effort, the extent of the pains they've gone through to sort of send a letter back, and also to send money back home. I think all these things resonate well with the audience.
Do you think the Teochew language used in the movie has made a difference?
I think because of the particular topic and subject matter, Teochew obviously makes it a lot more authentic. So, and authenticity in any kind of storytelling is really important. So I think it certainly adds to the value.
So would you watch the movie when you're back in Singapore?
If I have a choice, I will watch the movie in its Teochew language, because that is how it really connects best, and that's how it will become a lot more authentic to me.
Do you think Singapore needs more media in dialects?
I think Singapore should re-examine the policy around dialects, but I think we have to put that in the right context, right? Because media per se is in general.
Yeah.
And today you're talking about so many different kind of platforms. I would say Singapore, having gone through the decades of the policy around the regulation of dialects, is also timely for us. Maybe this movie really sort of evoked that kind of strong emotions among a lot of people, and to call for a re-examination, a review of the current policy. And I think it's timely because if you look at the landscape, it has changed a lot. And I do know that, in fact, the government has been sort of making some progress in terms of relaxing some of these regulations. But the question is the pace. Is it fast enough? For a platform like the cinema, I think there's no reason for us to be so conservative. I think we should start to really ask ourselves, does it still matter for us to play a Hong Kong movie in its original Cantonese language? For that matter, in China, for example, right? When the Hong Kong movies are screened in China, there's no policy to restrict the language. It's very much left to the distributors to decide and say, what we see now in China is that apart from the Guangdong province, Guangdong because they understand Cantonese, where Hong Kong movies, most of them would still be screened in Cantonese. The rest of China, they would prefer the dub version in Mandarin because I think that's the choice of the audience. What I'm trying to say is that today, with the prevalence of good Mandarin movies, other dialect content, right, in terms of movie, they only represent a certain fraction of that. To me, there's no more concern like what we used to have in the past, right? If you don't have those policies in the past, you saw so many Hong Kong movies coming on screen, you get scared, right?
Correct.
But today is not the case anymore. A lot of very good movies from China, Mandarin speaking. I think let the audience then decide the language of choice, right? That they prefer. Then the market will decide then how to actually distribute the content. My personal view is that it should be just freed up and let market forces decide that, because the concern in the past no longer exists here today, right? And you are seeing more and more very strong, good Mandarin movies. And there's no danger of people just losing their so-called language because of that.
Maybe our Speak Mandarin campaign is too successful.
Yeah, I think a lot of the younger Singaporeans, first of all, they don't speak the dialects. Very few will be interested. So the challenge now is to see how we can preserve some of this heritage and culture. And but my suggestion is, you talk about young, right? The young one, where do they mostly consume their content?
Online.
Yeah. So I think there again is where the opportunity lies, if you ask me, right? And the fact that it's online, the kind of content that you can make can be so varied, so flexible, right? It can be short films, it can be all kinds of narratives. So that is where I think we should seriously look at and say how we can sort of reach out to the young audiences today with compelling content, right? This is a good example, right? Dear You shows that, you have a movie with a topic that's deeply rooted in a certain kind of dialect and culture, and it does so well. Why? Because there are still universal elements there, right? Of affection, love, kindness, kinship. So things like that will continue to sort of resonate well.
During Parliament, our acting minister, David Neo, mentioned minister has no time to watch movie. He said that in Mandarin. 部长没有时间看电影. So what was your gut reaction to this?
I think if you look at it at two levels, on the one hand, I'm quite sure that he meant it very light-hearted manner, right? He was quipping, right? This comment. But if you look at it from the perspective of the context, the specific issue was around, the policy in relation to dialect movies. Then it's not so much about whether you have the time, because out of necessity, if you are re-examining this whole policy and if you are reviewing that, certainly there's a need to be able to have better understanding of that. And I think part of it will include really watching this particular movie and say, are the arguments around it valid or not, right? So it gives you a better insight. But having said that, I would add on the fact that I think the part about whether ministers have the time to watch movie is very much left to the individuals. I think I do know of ministers and MPs who enjoy watching movies. In fact, when I was in MM2, a lot of our gala premiere, we actually have our MPs and ministers gracing the occasion. They enjoy the movies. They enjoy watching movies. It's really a choice. When you really are interested, I'm sure they will find the time. They will find the time. It's like what I mentioned earlier. I like to watch football. When the World Cup comes, I won't say I will have no time, right? So it's really making time for that.
Do you think Singapore can produce a movie like给阿嬷的情书kind of movie in dialects?
Okay, I would put it this way. I think the challenge for Singapore, right, filmmakers, is to make a movie that has got that universal appeal. Doesn't matter the language. Because if I set out to say it has to be in dialect, the question, in fact, dialect to me, if you are talking about success, okay, successful depends on how you define it, right? Jack Neal's film, Our Boys to Men, was it successful? From a certain perspective, it was hugely successful.
Correct.
But then on the other hand, you say, from the more global or international perspective, maybe it's still a struggle there. People cannot relate to. So we have to define success. But my aspiration, if we talk about successful Singapore film, would be something that has got that very international impact, right? As a commercial person, I wouldn't look at winning awards alone as successful. I think it has to be also borne out by good box office. So in order to achieve that, the important thing is not so much to decide whether it is a dialect film or it's a Chinese film. The important thing is to ask, are we able to produce a movie with a story that's so compelling and universally compelling? I don't mean just compelling to Singaporean. The kinship, struggle, and then that kind of touching moments that people can really find is so moving and so impactful. I think the challenge is for Singaporean storytellers, filmmakers, to be able to sort of find something there, right? And whether it's in dialect or any language, I think is less important at this point before you conceive the storyline. Once you have the storyline, then you ask, what is more authentic? What is more authentic? That elements of dialect, is it going to add more authenticity? I think that is the question to ask. But I'm hopeful.
Okay.
And I believe that Singapore, like anything else, right, with the aspirations that we have and with the talent that we have, I'm hopeful that we'll be able to achieve that in the not too distant future.
Which dialect group are you from?
I'm a Hokkien.
Do you use Hokkien at home?
I used to when my mother was with me. Unfortunately, after my mother passed away, the family hardly speak Hokkien anymore. I think in a way we are guilty of seeing the fact that our children don't really speak the dialect, and also hardly any interest in the dialect culture. I think that's also a consequence of that generation that we actually experienced, at the time when the schools were all, unified in terms of making sure that they are grounded properly. Nothing wrong with that. I understand that. So today, maybe we have to be taking a more serious approach and ask ourselves how to ensure that we don't totally lose that. Especially now, the next generation, for example. We're not even talking about children now. It's our children's children. It's going to be even more challenging. But on the other hand, I think if you look at the whole landscape, right, there's no more concern about losing our Mandarin roots, because Mandarin is so strong now, right? For reasons of commerce, entertainment, everything, Mandarin is so dominant. There's no need to worry so much. Then we have to now start to put effort into how to actually find our own roots. So I feel that maybe we do have a certain responsibility there to tell stories to our young generation, in whatever form, stories of our forefathers, our culture, our history. It's not easy, but I believe there are people who are good at that, who can actually bring out in a very lively form the roots of our various dialects and our various culture. So hopefully we can do more of that.
Will you like teach your grandson dialect, like Hokkien?
First thing, I think, first thing for him, right? The challenge is first thing to understand Chinese first. If he doesn't understand Chinese, we don't even have a chance to talk about the dialect. So because he lives in a Western country, in the UK, I think that's even more challenging. But I'm not losing hope there, because you look at even a lot of Western people, they have got a lot of fascination with our Asian culture, our Chinese culture. So I think the key is to sort of keep the interest there for them. And I think the reason why I'm hopeful is because the whole plan is that we want him to be continue to exposed to that part of the world, right? Even when he grows up here, we want to make sure that he knows where is Singapore, he knows Singapore, and he's exposed there, and at the right time, how we want to actually introduce him to something, because children are very curious and they have that fascination with many things. So I think that's the opportunity to really introduce them to all these more colorful history and culture of ours. Yeah, I'm hoping that we can do that.
What is your favorite place in Edinburgh?
Oh, Edinburgh. There are so many places that we enjoy going to. There are a lot of places that are very scenic, very serene, and I like to just walk along, enjoy the scenery and the good air. But if I happen to be in the heart of the city, right, in where it tends to be more crowded, I found a place in Uniqlo along Princess Street. At level 2, they have a very nice cafe overlooking, because it's a glass wall overlooking the park opposite. Very nice scenery, and you can just sit there, have your cup of coffee, and enjoy the scenery and the calmness and serenity. The crowd you can see down there, but over there is really very relaxing. I like that. I like the place there. If I happen to be in the heart of the city, to unwind. But otherwise, a lot of places, even here in Dean Village, you just walk along the stream, the path around the stream is so relaxing.
Thanks for your time. Maybe you should do some Google review on whatever places you have been to.
I would hopefully one day I can be a good guide for people who come here.
Yeah, you will sure be. Yeah. Anyway, thanks for your time.
My pleasure to meet you here.
Yeah, hope to see you again in Singapore.
Yeah, we'll catch up again.